The envelope was already on the kitchen counter when I got home from work that Friday. My daughter-in-law had slipped it under the door, which told me everything I needed to know about the conversation that was coming. I'm 63 years old. I have worked as a hospital billing coordinator for 31 years. I have a pension coming, a 401(n) I've been feeding since I was 32, and a small but paid-off house in Clarksville, Tennessee that I bought myself after my divorce. I say all of that not to brag. Lord knows I've made my share of bad decisions. But because you need to understand who I am before you understand what happened at that dinner table in March. The envelope had a post-it on it, my son's handwriting. Mom. Read this before Sunday. Love, Aaron. I set my purse down. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea. I sat at my kitchen table and I read. It was a printout, 3 pages, stapled. The first page was a letter, typed, not handwritten, which I noted, explaining that Aaron and his wife Justine had been doing some long-term planning and wanted to share some exciting possibilities with me at Sunday dinner. The second and third pages were a budget, their budget, monthly income, monthly expenses, categories highlighted in yellow. I read it twice. Then I folded it, put it back in the envelope, and slid it into the drawer under my silverware, where I keep things I'm not ready to think about yet. I thought about it all weekend anyway. Aaron is my only child. He's 36. He works in commercial real estate, not selling houses, the corporate side, lease negotiations for big office buildings, and he makes good money. His wife, Justine, is a marketing director at a regional healthcare company. Together, I knew they were pulling in somewhere around $240,000 to $250,000 a year. I knew this because Aaron told me proudly at Thanksgiving, the way he always shared financial news, like a boy handing his mother a report card. They have 2 children. My granddaughter Penny is 4. My grandson is 18 months old, still mostly running into furniture and calling everything Dat. I love them both more than I have words for. They bought a house 3 years ago in Franklin, Tennessee, a beautiful house. 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, a mudroom with built-in cubbies, a primary suite that I'm pretty sure is larger than my entire first floor. The mortgage, Aaron had mentioned once, was around $4,200 a month. When they bought it, I had been asked to co-sign. I want to be honest about that. I said yes. I said yes because Aaron had just switched firms and his income history was patchy on paper, and the loan officer said having a co-signer with steady long-term employment would help lock in a better rate. I said yes because he's my son and I trusted him. I said yes because Justine showed me a spreadsheet. Their spreadsheet, the one they'd made, and it looked fine. Tight, but fine. What I did not do was look close enough. Sunday dinner was at their house. It always was. They had the space, they had the kitchen, and honestly, I think Justine preferred it that way. She was a good host. She made brisket. There was a charcuterie board. My granddaughter showed me a drawing she'd made of a purple horse, and I told her it was the best horse I'd ever seen, which it genuinely might have been. We ate. We talked. Aaron opened a bottle of wine. I recognized from a local vineyard that charged $45 a bottle. I sipped mine slowly. I had a feeling I wanted to be clear-headed. After the kids were settled in front of a movie in the playroom, Aaron refilled everyone's glass and leaned back in his chair in the way he does. When he's about to say something, he's been rehearsing. "Mom," he said, "we wanted to talk to you about something we've been thinking about for a while." I said, "Okay." Justine folded her hands on the table. She had the same look she got before presentations, focused and smooth. "We've been doing a lot of thinking about what's best for the kids," she said, "especially now that Owen is getting older and Penny's starting pre-K in the fall." I nodded. "Daycare for both of them," Aaron said, "is running us about $3,800 a month." "That's a lot," I said, because it was. "It is, and honestly, Mom, the quality." He shook his head. "We're not happy with it." Penny had 3 different lead teachers this year. Owen's been sick constantly. We just feel like at this stage what they really need is family. He let that land, I said. "What are you thinking?" Justine smiled. It was a warm smile. She was good at warm smiles. "We've been looking at the numbers, and we really think, if you were to retire, even just a little early, it could work out beautifully for everyone." You'd be here for the kids, they'd have consistency, and you wouldn't have to keep making that commute every day. I am 63 years old. My full Social Security benefit kicks in at 67. My pension is calculated on my final 5 years of salary, and my salary has gone up considerably in the last 3 years. Retire, I said. You've worked so hard, Aaron said. You deserve a break. I have 4 years until my pension fully vests at the highest tier. Right, but with what you have saved. Aaron. I set down my fork. What exactly are you proposing? He looked at Justine. She looked at him. Then he said, we were thinking you could retire this summer, watch the kids on weekdays. We'd cover your expenses, you know, gas, groceries if you're here, that kind of thing. And we actually wanted to talk to you about something else, too. Of course you did, I said, very quietly. He didn't catch the tone. He pulled out a folder, his own folder, manila, with a few papers in it, and slid it across the table toward me. Our line of credit is resetting in September. The rate's going to jump pretty significantly. And our mortgage broker says if we refinance now, we can lock in something much better. But with me having changed firms again last year, you need a co-signer, I said, just to strengthen the application. Your income, your history. Aaron, you want me to retire so that I have no income, and also co-sign a mortgage using my income. Silence. Those two things, I said, cannot both happen. Justine's smile had changed slightly. It was still there, but thinner. Well, the refinance would come first, obviously, and then I'd have no income and my name would still be on your mortgage. I picked up my wine glass. I took a sip. Tell me more about what's in the line of credit. Aaron shifted in his chair. It's just a HELOC. We used it when we renovated the kitchen. And the back porch, Justine said. Then, seemed to wish she hadn't. And what's the balance? Around $80,000. I set down the glass. $80,000 on a home equity line of credit, a mortgage over $4,000 a month, and $3,800 in daycare, and they were asking me to retire early and hand them my credit history so they could restructure it. My son, who earned $250,000 a year combined with his wife, was asking his 63-year-old mother to give up her pension and become free childcare. I excused myself to use the bathroom. I took my purse with me, which Justine probably noticed. I sat on the closed toilet lid in their immaculate half bath, the one with the shiplap accent wall and the little dish of potpourri shaped like lemons, and I breathed. Then I opened my purse and I took out the notebook I always keep in there, a small spiral one, and I started writing. I've kept notes my whole career. You do, in billing. You write things down so that later no one can say you didn't hear them correctly. I wrote down what Aaron had said and what Justine had said, and the numbers I could remember. I wrote down HELOC, $80 K. Mortgage, $4,200 mo. Daycare, $3,800 mo. Then I sat there and I thought about the envelope they'd sent me, the budget they'd included. I went back out. I didn't say anything else about it that night. I helped clear the table. I kissed my grandchildren goodnight. Penny in her room full of stuffed animals, the baby already asleep with his little fist next to his cheek, and I hugged Aaron at the door and I said I would think about everything. On the drive home, I called my friend Dottie. Dottie is 68 and retired and has 4 grandchildren and more wisdom about family money than anyone I know. I told her the whole thing in the 22 minutes it took me to get from Franklin to Clarksville. When I finished, she said, "Did you look at what they're actually spending?" I said, "They sent me their budget." She said, "Their budget and their spending are 2 different things." I thought about that for a long time after I hung up. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not going to lie about it either. I had co-signed their mortgage 3 years ago. As a co-signer, I had access to certain things, statements, payment history, information the lender had given me when I signed. And Aaron, my boy, had never been particularly careful about what he left open on his laptop when I visited. I had seen things over the years. Numbers that floated past and lodged in my memory without me trying. But most of what I found by simply asking. I called their mortgage servicer. I said I was a co-signer and I wanted to understand the current loan status and what refinancing would mean for my liability. They told me. Then I asked some careful questions about the HELOC, not the balance which Aaron had told me, but the history. when it was opened, what the payments had looked like. Then I took the budget they'd sent me, the one with the yellow highlighting, and I sat down at my own kitchen table with a legal pad and a calculator, and I started doing the math. Their take-home, after taxes, was roughly $14,000 a month, possibly a bit more. Mortgage, $4,200. HELOC minimum payment at reset rate. I estimated around $700, probably climbing. Daycare, $3,800. That was $8,700 in fixed monthly obligations before a single grocery, utility, or car payment. The cars were what I remembered next. Aaron drove a Chevy Tahoe he'd leased 2 years ago. Justine drove a Mercedes Glee she'd gotten just last year. I remembered because she'd mentioned it at Christmas, said they'd gotten a great deal. I didn't know their exact payments, but I knew enough about those vehicles to make educated guesses. $800, $900, maybe more for the Mercedes. I wrote, estimated car payments, since $600, $900. Then I thought about other things I'd noticed over the last year or so. The family photos from their ski trip to Park City in January. Penny's birthday party that had a rented bounce house and a cotton candy machine. And, I'm not making this up, a woman dressed as a princess who came and did crafts with the children for 2 hours. Aaron's golf memberships, and I'd heard him mention it to his cousin at Easter. And there was the matter of Justine's mother. Justine's mother, Rhonda, lived about 40 minutes south of them. She was in her early 60s, healthy, recently remarried to a man named Doug who had his own landscaping business. Rhonda had watched the children occasionally in the early days when Penny was a baby, but that had tapered off, and whenever I gently mentioned it, "Does Rhonda ever help with the kids?" Justine would get a particular expression and change the subject. I hadn't pushed it. It wasn't my business, but it was interesting. I thought about it more on Tuesday evening when Aaron called to check in and also casually to ask if I'd had a chance to think things over. I said, "I have some questions first." He said, "Of course, Mom, anything. Does Justine's mother watch the kids at all anymore?" A pause. "She's been pretty busy with Doug, but she's local." "Yeah, but, it's complicated. They have their own thing going on." "Is she paid?" I asked. "When she does watch them." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, why does that matter?" "Aaron, I just want to understand the full picture." He said he had to go check on the kids, and he'd call me back, and he didn't call me back that night. I called Rhonda myself the next morning. I want to be clear. I like Rhonda. We have always gotten along, the easy way that two women who both love the same children can get along, without having to be close friends. I called her and I said I just wanted to catch up, and we talked for 20 minutes about Doug's business and her garden. And then I said, very naturally, "I feel like we don't see you with the kids as much lately." Rhonda laughed, a short laugh. "Justine handles that," she said. "I help out when I can." I said, "I'm sure they appreciate it." There was a pause. "I do what I can," she said, in a way that closed the topic firmly. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat with that for a while. What I knew. Rhonda was local. Rhonda was available. Rhonda was not being asked to retire or provide free full-time childcare 5 days a week. And whatever arrangement did or didn't exist between Rhonda and Justine, it had produced a conversation in which Aaron casually mentioned that his mother, me, should be the solution to the childcare problem. Not his mother-in-law, me. I thought about that every day for the rest of the week. By Saturday, I had a legal pad with 2 pages of notes, a printed copy of their budget they'd sent me, my own calculations beside it, and a very clear picture of what was being asked of me and what was not being asked of Rhonda. I also had the numbers from the mortgage servicer, which told me that the HELOC had been opened 18 months ago and had been drawn down to its maximum within 6 months of opening. The kitchen renovation Aaron had mentioned was part of it. The back porch Justine had let slip was part of it. What accounted for the rest, I wasn't entirely sure, and I realized I didn't need to be. Sunday came around again. Aaron called and asked if I wanted to come for dinner. I said yes. I brought a pie, pecan, from the bakery on my street, and I brought my legal pad, which I tucked inside my tote bag. I had thought about leaving it at home. I thought about walking in soft, handling it gently, not making it a thing. But I am 63 years old. I have been soft at the wrong moments before. I know what that costs. Dinner was pot roast this time. The kids were their usual wonderful chaos. Penny told me that her friend at school had a dog with 3 legs, and she wanted one too. The baby sat in his high chair and threw peas onto the floor with tremendous satisfaction. I ate and I laughed, and I tried not to think about what came after. What came after started the same way as the Sunday before. Kids to the playroom, adults at the table, Aaron with his leaning back posture, Justine with her folded hands. "Have you had a chance to think?" Aaron asked. "I have," I said. I reached into my tote bag and I pulled out the legal pad. Aaron glanced at it. His expression shifted a little, not alarmed, just recalibrating. Justine looked at the legal pad and then at me, and her expression was harder to read. "I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly before we make any decisions," I said. I kept my voice even. "I have had 31 years of billing disputes. I know how to be even. Can I just walk through what I'm seeing?" Aaron said, "Mom, you don't have to." "I'd like to," I said. I looked at my notes. "Your combined gross is around $250. After taxes, you're bringing home somewhere around $14,000 a month. That's before retirement contributions, which I hope you're making." I looked up. Aaron nodded, a little slowly. "Your mortgage is $4,200. Your HELOC minimum at the reset rate is going to be around $700, probably closer to $800 as the rate climbs. And the balance is $80,000, which means you have roughly 11 to 12 years left on that at minimum payments." I paused. That line of credit was maxed out within 6 months of opening, which means whatever renovations you did, you went to the full limit. Justine said, "How do you know?" "I'm a cosigner on the primary mortgage," I said. "I have access to information related to that loan. I've had it for 3 years. Silence. I went on. "Daycare is $3,800. Your car payments, based on the vehicles you have, are somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. I don't know your exact lease terms. So before gas, groceries, utilities, insurance, or anything else, you're at roughly $11,000 a month in fixed obligations. On $14,000 take home, that leaves $3,000 for everything else." I let them sit with that. "I don't know exactly what you're spending in other categories," I said. "But I know about the ski trip. I know Penny's birthday party was not inexpensive. I've heard Aaron mention the golf club, and I know, because I know what cars lease for, and I can read a calendar, that your monthly spending is very likely exceeding your monthly income." Aaron said, "Mom, I'm not done," I said. Not unkindly, but clearly. "What you're asking me to do is retire 4 years early, losing the highest tier pension calculation that I have spent 12 years working toward, and become full-time childcare 5 days a week in exchange for gas money and groceries. And at the same time co-sign a refinance on your home and your HELOC, so that my credit and my income history debt, the same income I would be giving up, are tied to your debt." I set down the legal pad. "I need to ask you both something, and I need you to answer me honestly." I looked at Justine. "Rhonda is 40 minutes away. She's healthy. She's not working. Why isn't she part of this conversation?"
The air in the room changed.
Justine's came up slightly. "My mother has her own life. So do I said. Aaron started to say something. I held up one hand, gentle but firm, the way I used to when he was 12 and talking over me. "I'm going to say this once, and I'm going to say it calmly, because I love you both and I love those babies in there more than anything on this earth." I paused. "I am not going to retire early. I will lose a significant amount of my pension benefit, and I will not do that. I am also not going to co-sign the refinance, because if I have no income, it won't go through anyway, and if I do have income, it means I haven't retired, which means your child care problem hasn't been solved." I let that land. Those 2 requests cannot coexist. And even if they could, the answer to at least one of them would still be no. Justine said very quietly, "We're not trying to take advantage of you. I know you're not trying to," I said, and I meant it. I think that was true. I think they had looked at their own situation and looked at my situation and done a math that felt, to them, like it balanced. I think they genuinely believed they were offering me something. Rest, proximity to grandchildren, relief from the commute, while solving a problem of their own. I think they did not fully see what they were asking me to give up. People rarely do when the giving is on someone else's side of the ledger. But I need you to hear me, I said. You make $250,000 a year. You cannot afford daycare. That is not a me problem. That is a spending problem. Justine looked at the table. Aaron looked at his hands. I am happy, genuinely happy, to take the kids 1 day a week. Saturdays or whatever day works. I will come here. Or you'll bring them to me, and I will be their grandmother, which is the greatest thing I get to be. I picked up my legal pad and put it back in my bag, but I will not be your employee. And I will not be your co-signer. And I will not retire 4 years early and lose a pension I worked 3 decades for because you bought 2 luxury cars and a kitchen you couldn't afford. Aaron looked up at that. He looked like he was going to argue. Then he looked like he wasn't. Then he looked like a 36-year-old man who had just heard something he'd needed to hear for a while. Justine excused herself from the table. I sat with Aaron for a few minutes. Neither of us said anything important. I refilled my water glass. He looked out the window at the back porch that had helped drain the HELOC, and he was quiet. After a while I said, "How are you two, really? Not the finances, how are you?" He let out a long breath. "Tired," he said. "We're both really tired." "I know," I said. "That age, 2 little kids, big jobs, big mortgage. It's a lot." "Yeah. There are ways through it that don't involve asking me to retire," I said. "You know that." He nodded. He didn't look at me, but he nodded. I found Justine in the kitchen, rinsing the pot roast pan. I stood beside her, and I picked up a dish towel without asking. We did the dishes together for a few minutes without talking. Then she said, "I didn't know you knew about the HELOC details. I've been a co-signer for 3 years," I said. "I probably should have been paying more attention." She rinsed a plate. "We got a little carried away with the renovation." "It happens." Another plate. "The golf membership was Aaron's idea," she said. Then, "The ski trip was mine." "Those things don't have to be anyone's fault," I said. "They just are what they are. And now you figure out what to let go of." She didn't say anything to that. But she didn't argue either. I said goodnight to the kids. Penny had fallen asleep on the couch, her purple horse drawing clutched in one hand, and I kissed the top of her head so lightly I barely touched her, the way you kiss a sleeping child, trying not to take anything from the moment but wanting to leave something there. I hugged Aaron at the door. He held on a few seconds longer than usual. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," I said. "That's why I told you the truth. It's been 6 weeks since that Sunday." Aaron and Justine did not refinance the mortgage. Not yet, anyway. Aaron told me they're looking at the HELOC more seriously now, talking to a financial advisor about a payoff plan. Justine mentioned, in a text that was carefully casual, that her mother, Rhonda, had agreed to take the kids 2 days a week and that they'd found a smaller in-home daycare for the other 3 days that would run them about $2,200 a month instead of $3,800. That's $1,600 a month they freed up without asking me to give up my pension. I'm not saying I told you so. I would never say that, at least not out loud. The golf membership, as far as I know, is still active. But Aaron mentioned last week that they're looking at the lease terms on the Mercedes, whether it makes sense to swap into something smaller when it comes up for renewal. I didn't say anything about that either. Some things you have to let people arrive at on their own. I still come on Saturdays. Penny and I baked banana bread 2 weeks ago. She stood on her step stool and stirred with deep seriousness and a certain amount of flour on her face. The baby tried to eat a pot holder, and I managed to stop him before he succeeded, which I counted as a win. I drove home that Saturday with banana bread in the passenger seat and the radio on and the last of the afternoon light coming through the windshield, and I thought about what it had cost me to say what I'd said at that dinner table. The hours of worrying, the night I didn't sleep, the moment I had pulled out that legal pad and watched my son's face recalibrate, and I thought about what it would have cost me not to say it. There was no contest. I am 63 years old. I have worked hard for everything I have. I love my son and his children and even my daughter-in-law, difficult as some of that love is to hold. But I brought the math. That was my job that night, and I did it.